No wonder a lot of first-time players are initially happy when they see this, but are more than ready to give up on the Supra when they find out how bad the handling is. Hello racing fans! Welcome back to another video, and I hope you're doing well wherever you are. Today, we're going to do another tuning session. And we're doing it with a car that has got a reputation for being impossible to drive in Assoluto racing. This is none other than the Toyota Supra RZ D-SPEC. Do stay on for the rest of the video to see my settings for this car. This 1997 version of the beloved Supra is also one of the most well-known, and it kinda achieved iconic status when it was featured as one of the prime character cars in The Fast and the Furious. So you know how high the expectations are for this car, but sadly, many AR players are willing to sell it because it's quite a challenge to drive. So stay on, and I'll show you how to control this legendary beast. But first, do give us a thumbs up if you like this video, click subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. The Supra was my first ever import pull in Assoluto racing, and if you've been here on the channel for some time, you know that it was the car that I used for my first ever endurance sim race. So this car has some sort of sentimental value for me, but other than that, this car is one of my favorites because of its awesome performance. So let's get on to tuning this car, and let me show you how you can get the most out of your Supra RZ D-SPEC. First, let me show you how the Supra handles in its stock setup. As you can see, it's impossible to drive in a straight line. The Supra RZ has over 700 horsepower under the hood, but you can't make much use of that if you end up spinning. No wonder a lot of first-time players are initially happy when they see this, but are more than ready to give up on the Supra when they find out how bad the handling is. So if you're going to rate the Supra between 1 and 10, most players are going to give it a negative 10 because it's downright impossible. Okay, so some of you might react, but it's a D-SPEC car. It was designed to slide. So granted, it is a drift spec or D-SPEC car, meaning it was designed mainly for drifting. But there's no reason why you shouldn't set it up as a proper race car. Besides, I wouldn't want to waste those 735 horsepower just to drive this car in circles. So how do we tame this overpowered brute and make it run like we want it to? So there are two ways to go around it. First is detuning the car, or number two, fine-tuning it so you can get it to balance. Detuning a car means dialing down the max performance of a car so you can control it. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice top speed for control. And one way to do this is by decreasing the maximum output of the car. To do this, simply reduce the performance of the Supra by setting the engine to stage 1 and the turbo to stage 2. This will give you a respectable 475 horsepower, enough to get you safely through the corners and still give you the straight line speed to match up with your rivals. The second option is to fine-tune the Supra so you can get the handling and performance output to balance. This is trickier and this will take some time, and it may even involve some small adjustments when you switch between tracks. But this is definitely the better option because you're making use of the Supra 735 horsepower. You will need a bit of patience and experimentation here.
If you want easy, go play our R3.
And I think this is where the experience with Assoluto racing becomes more rewarding. The great thing when you get the Supra fresh from the import pool is that it comes maxed out with all the performance parts: racing brakes, exhaust, transmission, and suspension, a Stage 3 engine, and a Stage 4 turbo. You won't need to purchase any additional upgrades. Although I opted for Stage 1 weight reduction to give the car a bit of ballast. To fine-tune the Supra, start with adjusting the ride height, offset, and camber. Then, open a single-player race on any track, preferably Yamagata, Tsukuba, or AR Raceway, to serve as your test session. Once here, adjust the settings for traction control, steering assist, and the differential. Afterwards, take a lap or two to test if they improve handling. If there are no changes, restart the track session and switch to the suspension and handling tab to adjust the anti-roll bar, max steer angle, and Ackerman angle. You can also fine-tune the camber settings here. Take 2 to 3 test laps and take note how the car handles, especially around the corners. Does the rear snap around when you're exiting the corner, also known as oversteer? Or does the front end insist on going straight even though you want to turn it, otherwise known as understeer? Remember that what you want to achieve is you can turn fearlessly without bleeding too much speed going into the corner, and the rear end not being too squirrely when you're coming out of it. If you keep spinning out of a corner when you apply the throttle, try adjusting the traction and differential settings to minimize or eliminate wheel spin. You might also consider switching to a throttle slider instead of the default gas pedal so you can control the power to the wheels. It's also a good idea to make use of the car's aero to give you the grip you need to take on the corners. The Supra RZ has got a nice rear wing and some vanes or end plates, and a diffuser that keep the rear end quite planted, especially on the straights. However, if the balance is wrong, you end up getting too much rear end grip and it sends the car into oversteer. So to cope with this, I increased the car's rake angle, that is, the angle created by the rear end of the car in relation to its front end. A higher rake means that the rear of the car is higher than the nose. So when the rear wing pushes the rear wheels and the rear end of the car to the ground, it gives you just enough grip without causing you to spin. One last thing to adjust is the brake power and balance of the car. Here, you can control how much force is applied to the brakes when you press the pedal or the slider if you are using a brake slider button. This will dictate how fast or how slow you can go into a corner, which in turn affects your overall lap time. Once you're confident with the balance of the car, you can now proceed with adjusting the gear ratios. This is a task you will have to see for yourself, as mismatched ratios can greatly affect the performance of the car. The safest way to do this is by making small changes instead of wholesale ones, and see if the performance of the Supra improves or not. Unless you're brave and willing to experiment or are confident with what you're doing, I recommend keeping the transmission settings to the default setup to save yourself the headache. Or, you can copy settings from another user like from my setup in the end of this video, and adjust this to suit your style. So that's it. That's how you tune your Toyota Supra RZ D-SPEC. Is it worth keeping in your garage? I say definitely yes. This car is definitely a keeper. Whether you keep it for drifting, drag, or circuit racing, that's entirely up to you. But with this set of tips, I hope you don't let it just sit in your garage, or maybe don't even sell it. I hope I was able to show you that this is a car worth keeping. So that's all for today's video. Check out my settings for the Supra RZ, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet, and click the bell for notifications. Stay safe at home, okay? And stay away from the virus. Of course, don't forget to run your race, keep the faith, and finish strong. See you in the next video.